Welcome, everyone. Lori Harris with Harris Whitesell Consulting, and I am your host for Maximize Excellence podcast. I'm excited today, and we've got our guest, Peter Cotton. He is the president of Best Sales Talent Incorporated, and he does talent acquisition professional, offering management consulting services in the service and recruitment of sales management and marketing professionals. Peter operates on the basic principle of it takes one to know one, and I'm hoping that we'll talk about that, Peter. He's an award-winning salesman and sales manager from a Fortune 500 company. He has spent the last 48 years in the recruiting industry. He owned and operated the franchise office of Sales Consultants of Rhode Island for 36 years. He was a sales consultant. In that position, he was part of the world's largest executive search firm, MRI, which is Management Recruiters International. So in the zenith of Management Recruiters International, they had more than 1,200 offices worldwide with 4,500 recruiters, placing more than 40,000 professionals each year. And Peter was a part of them. His office of sales consultants specialized in search, recruitment, placement of sales, sales management, and marketing talent around the world. Peter was the third franchisee in the history of MRI to be accepted into the MRI Ring of Honor for having achieved the level of $1 million in fees from placement activity. Phew, that's a lot of placement, Peter. After moving to Massachusetts in 2014, Peter rebranded under the name of Best Sales Talent LLC and continues to provide the same services of search, recruitment, and placement of best sales, sales management, and marketing professionals. And capitalizing on sales management experience, Peter co-authored a book for the American Management Association, along with Professor Eugene Johnson from the University of Rhode Island, titled How to Be an Effective Sales Manager. Utilizing his sales and organizational management skills simultaneously while he was operating his recruiter business, Peter became the founder, president, and executive director of the Make-A-Wish Foundation of Rhode Island. And the Rhode Island chapter was the 75th in the U.S. and was the fastest startup in the charity's national history, granting more than 1,000 wishes to children with life-threatening illnesses in less than 10 years. Remarkable, Peter. In the process, he earned the JCPenney Golden Rule Award and was recognized by President George W. Bush and Bill Clinton for his outstanding community service. So, ladies and gentlemen that are out there today and that are going to be clicking on this podcast to listen to Peter, I want you to know this is a remarkable, remarkable leader in our realm of business, in the realm of these organizations and agencies that truly serve others and support those things that are meaningful and purposeful in the world. And I want you to right now just join me in welcoming and thanking Peter for coming onto the podcast as our guest to talk about all things in what he does. So welcome, Peter, and thank you very much. Very admirable, by the way.
Thank you, Lori. It's a pleasure to be here. You made a couple of comments there. You said, wow, $1 million in fees. That's really something. It was done at the level of fees, which at the time were $2,400 to $4,200.
Oh my goodness. That puts it completely into perspective. That gives it complete context.
Right. The fees increased over time.
Uh-huh.
they're upwards of $50,000 now. But
Wow.
back then, the fees were very low because we were dealing with lower salaries and
Right.
our percentages of salary. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to do that. And I've enjoyed my career as a recruiter. I find that I have a great deal of impact on people and on companies. In fact, I say I change people's lives and I build companies through the work that I do. And I'm a recruiter on a national basis. I'm industry agnostic. I work on a retained basis with client companies. Um, and as you discussed, I specialize in sales management, and marketing talent.
Excellent. So, Peter, tell us, what is recruiting excellence? What does that what does that entail? What's the scope of that look like?
Well, from my perspective, I think recruiter excellence centers around the two people that we deal with, candidates and employers, and each has to have a remarkable experience on interfacing with us and with the other side of the equation. So we want to give a very, very positive candidate experience, and we want to give a very positive employer experience through the process of interviewing and hiring people. Uh, but it goes on to include ongoing training, advanced training. We are people who are in sales, essentially, and you never know everything. So you should always learn something new every day and strive to uh, use those things that you've learned in your daily work. Um, Operational excellence also probably revolves around um, the infrastructure within a recruiting firm. You have to have uh, a data-driven decision-making process on candidates and employers. You have to have an efficient ATS, applicant tracking system. I'd rather call it an ARS, uh, an RTS, recruiter tracking system. I'll explain that a little later. And
Okay.
you have to be involved with feedback loops. You have to find out how you're doing. Remember, Ed Koch used to walk down the street and say to people, "How am I doing?" Well, it's the same thing as a recruiter. You need to get feedback on how you're doing with a candidate. Are they happy? Do they have questions? Is there anything more you can do for them? And by the same token, also with an employer. So it's an ongoing process.
And in operational excellence for recruiting, to achieve effectiveness in that, what do you think are maybe three of the top issues that you are coming across constantly in the market today?
One of them is probably time to fill. Candidates do not want to go through a long and arduous interviewing process.
Mhm.
And employers sometimes still are stuck in the old ways of doing things.
Mhm.
So our job is to sort of grease the skids. We need to educate and even coach the employers on why working on a more rapid pace is very critical because you're going to lose a very good candidate otherwise.
Right. And for sales management, and
Mark.
this arena that you work in, I'm curious, do you see, and given that there's this hybrid environment, are you seeing the process for this changed because now people don't necessarily all work from brick and mortar anymore, or is hybrid also considered part of this solution for you?
Well, for most sales positions, they are field selling. They
Yes.
don't have an office to report to. In fact, any sales manager who has salespeople in the office ought to be trained on how to get them out in the field. 'Cause
Mhm.
they're not selling anybody while they're in the office,
Right.
unless it's a telephone sale, obviously.
Right. Right.
But most of it requires face-to-face communication. There
Good.
is a certain amount of selling is happening via Zoom these days,
Uh-huh.
um, which is a new phenomenon, if you will, relatively new.
Mm-hmm.
But the actual selling is typically out in the marketplace, particularly
Mm-hmm.
with industrial sales.
Yeah, and you kind of touched the tipping point for why operational excellence is so important. Can you expound on that some more?
On why operational excellence is important.
Yeah.
I guess it's because we have to take the candidate and their experience and relate to it. We have to personalize the service that we're providing, and the candidate needs to know that we care about them. Any candidate who senses that it's a transaction that he's dealing with a particular recruiter is not going to do very well representing the recruiter and even interviewing. They're not interested in transactional uh, function. They want to have a relationship. By the same token, you need to have a relationship with the employer. Uh, you never send anyone we know a lot about to an employer we know little about, and vice versa. So we ask the employer an awful lot of questions so that we can become well informed and be able to stand on every rooftop and shout the virtues of that company to all that could hear it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and frankly, that's what we do most of the time. We're on the phone talking to people, selling opportunities.
So because you create such a strong relationship with your candidates, it sounds like you get to know them quite well and you help them with alignment as well as you're helping the company align to those employees who are deemed in alignment with their mission, vision, values, their strategies, and these job descriptions that are in there in the job design. Are you finding in today's market a unique behavior where retention and getting, keeping people in those roles is often difficult? And are you getting people coming back to you because of they get in and they find out that they're not in alignment with what they thought, and are they coming back to you to find that better alignment? And also the corporation is finding that that employee might not be a best fit after they've been there a while. And how are you managing those two scenarios, which is truly about that fit that you're talking about? And what kind of results are you getting with that? And today, because in our world in talent management, we hear a lot about, quiet quitting and a lot of different aspects of why people aren't staying in their jobs. So I'm kind of curious how that's impacting recruiting and how you're managing that with this excellence piece.
Uh, a lot of what you just said doesn't really occur to us.
Good.
If we do our job correctly, there is total alignment. I very,
Yes.
very, very rarely have somebody coming back to me saying, this is the wrong place for me. And
Excellent.
if they did, I wouldn't be able to work with them because I owe it to my client to help retain that talent. So I'll try to work out what the problem is with the
Mhm.
uh,
So when you're working with an organization that's having that happen, not that you've placed anyone in their organization, but you've gained a new client with an organization, a company, a corporation, and they're having issues with retention and they've hired you to come in and place. What are some of the things that you tell them up front?
I think more importantly would be what am I going to ask them up front?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are they having the kind of turnover that they're having? What's the history of the employer, the person who's managing these folks?
Mm,
Uh, where have they been before? What kind of
mhm,
roles have they held before? And
mhm,
what kind of rules, if you will, are they using, and what kind of metrics they're using to measure their salespeople? A lot of times, the employer might think that the person doesn't fit because they don't jive, right? But the person may be doing a lot of production, so dealing with that is another issue. But honestly, I don't mean to sound simplistic, but I very rarely have a candidate tell me that's the wrong place. And I very rarely have an employer say to me, this candidate is not who we thought it was. We need to hire somebody else.
Mhm.
But that brought up something, and I made some notes because I couldn't possibly remember this all. You're talking about employee retention, and the latest employment surveys and the BLS report from July. This is interesting. Shows that 1/4 of workers will quit in 2024. It found that Gen Z and younger millennials are more inclined to quit than ever before. 37% of the 18 to 24-year-olds and 35% of 24 to 35-year-olds are somewhat or highly likely to quit. The reasons for quitting are the typical ones, low pay, more benefits, better opportunity, etc. A lot of stress was another indicator as why people change. But when I looked at the stats, um, I found that more than 50% of the new jobs are occurring in small to medium businesses. That's no surprise. But if you look at the unemployment rate, it's now 4.3%, or it was at the end of July. And that's for all workers. Recruiters recruit college degreed candidates. In July, that unemployment rate was 2.3%, lower than last year's 2.4. So understanding there's no such thing as 0% unemployment. That's an impossibility
Correct.
because there is a certain amount of unavoidable and acceptable unemployment that typically ranges between 4 to 6%, average about 5. Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winning economist, said that on average it's 5%, but we're dealing in the smaller market at 2.3% of unemployment. So in my world, most of the people who want a job have a job. In fact, is there a way I can share a slide with you?
Let me look. That I don't know.
I had asked before we started, but you didn't.
Yeah, that would have been great. That
What does present mean? I can do a slide.
yes, go ahead. Go ahead and click on, and you should be able to link it. Yes.
Okay, hold on a
Be the
second.
first. I love this. There's always a first.
Let me find it.
And as you're looking for that, I want you to also think about in that 2.3%, which you say is your market, and in an affording them this experience, are they repeating with you because they're transitioning and or transforming? Is it that they are promoting, and are you helping them with the promotional side of this when they go from one company to another? Are those some of the scenarios that play out for you?
I think typically the ones that we deal with, they're going on lateral moves, but for more money,
Gotcha.
better location,
Yeah.
better company. There are some moves from field sales into sales management, but
Mhm.
those are tricky because if you're going to bring in a new person to be sales manager who's not familiar with the company or the business, the sales force is going to get demoralized because they all were hoping that they're going to get promoted.
Right.
So you could have a little bit of a war on your hands. It's always best to promote from within. And if you do the right selection, that usually works very well. So not as much transition from field sales to sales management, changing companies. Within the same company, yes.
Did you find the slide?
I did not find it. I'm sorry to
Oh, no,
say.
that's okay. That's all
But
right.
I can describe what I wanted to show you.
Yeah, do that, please.
It showed 3 cones on a graph, and it showed 2 small cones and 1 very high cone. The 2 small cones represented unemployed lookers, and the other one was employed lookers. Employed lookers are those who are always looking for another job, even if they have one. They're moving around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
The unemployed lookers may be um, laid off, fired, could even be quit.
Mm-hmm.
Most companies who post advertisements, job boards or on their website, they're trying to reach 80% of the talent pool, which is comprised of those two markets or cones, the unemployed looker and the employed looker. That represents 80% of job board respondents. The larger cone that would have shown you is 80%. Those are the people who are happily employed, thought well of where they are. They're not looking for another job. They don't have a resume put together. They're not working with recruiters. And those are the people that recruiters like me are approaching and recruiting. So we're tapping them on the shoulder when they're doing a good job, and we're offering them an opportunity to explore what could be a better one. So I'm sorry I couldn't show that slide because it really puts it in focus, but I think you get a general picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. And so this target audience, this target client that you work with, how is it that recruiter agility plays into this process and supports this relationship that you build with them? Talk about agility.
Yeah. Ever see the guy with the long dowels, spin plates? And he's got 10 dowels in a row and he's trying to keep those plates going. That's
Uh-huh,
pretty much what the job of a recruiter is.
uh-huh.
Trying to keep so many things going at the same time. Agility is in two ways. One is during a low market where there's not as many jobs, and the other is when there's high demand, when there's a lot of jobs to fill. So a recruiter has to be agile enough to switch gears to adapt to the new way of things going on. And uh, with low volume of jobs, they have more time to do things like get their relationships nailed down, um, practice best practices, train more, do the things that are going to be helpful to them when the market picks up a little bit. On the other side of the coin, those people are really responding very quickly to what's going on in the marketplace, and they would probably be aligning data-driven decisions, um, making sure that the hiring process goes smoothly, uh, continuing to build relationships as well, but they're moving much faster.
In that process, when you do have a low market, you mentioned there's time to strengthen that relationship. I would imagine that in building that relationship, there's also some coaching that you do and focusing on really helping that person develop a strong package to present and to be able to authentically feature and showcase. How do you do that? What are some of the things that entail that piece of it?
Interestingly enough, most salespeople have an innate sense of what that's all about
Uh-huh.
because they're out in the field every day presenting themselves or their company. So
Mhm.
it's not very hard for them to transition over to presenting themselves, although they don't like talking about themselves very much because they think it's bragging.
Mhm.
Uh, we look at their resume. We want to make sure that the accomplishments and achievements are bold enough to be seen. We want to make sure that they're significant ones on their resume. But we also conduct coaching about how to interview, what the interview process is going to look like, how many steps are involved, what they need to do to be effective in each role, in each stage of the interview process. We might even coach them by telling them to expect certain types of questions. We don't know the questions that are being asked, but we can prep them for behavioral types of questions, technical questions, uh, performance questions. So we're coaching them on what those kinds of questions might be. On the other side, we're coaching employers on how to interview. You know, strangely enough, most employers don't know how to interview.
Right.
They haven't had the practice that a candidate has. You go to
Right.
the bookstore or library, you'll find tons of books about how to interview if you're a candidate, but they don't have a lot of books on the shelf how to interview candidates. And most employers don't go through any kind of training about that.
Uh-huh.
And when we get into writing a job description with them, we learn very quickly how much they know about hiring. And it's
Uh-huh.
surprising how little they know.
And I love it on our side of the house, Peter. We're able to look at within the culture, there's a dynamic of a lever for culture and climate and engagement that we can actually see if job design is effective or not. And pinpoint that right away from the data that comes in from these culture and climate inventories and engagement surveys. And it's wonderful for the organization because then they in turn can work with someone like you to develop that and enhance that for their process. And so I commend you for doing that type and that level of detailed work with these clients and these candidates, because I think it does give you that ability to maximize excellence in who you are and what you do. And
There's
of
something
course,
else we do.
yeah, go ahead.
Um, we get the employer to learn how to sell the opportunity he wants to fill.
Love that.
We teach them how to present it in a way that makes it sound uh, both attractive, interesting, without stretching the truth or lying in any way, of course. But
Uh-huh.
we want them to sell it. So we ask them to sell us first. And we learn very quickly they're not very effective at it. So we teach them how.
Yeah.
Then we record their perfect presentation. Then we also ask the employer, tell us the 10 or 12 most important things that you need to see in a candidate to say, yes, that candidate is qualified. I want to see them. If everything else is fine, I will hire them. So we take those qualities or those experiences and we turn them into questions. Then when we talk to the candidate, we don't just tell them about the job description and orally, and we don't just send them the job description. We say, don't take our word for it. Listen to the person you're going to go to work for. And we
Mhm.
let them see the video of the employer. Then we ask them questions, those 10 or 12 questions, and we record that. So when it comes time to present the candidate to the employer, they are not only seeing the resume, but they're getting our recommendation plus a video of them answering those 10 or 12 questions. And the
That's
employer
right.
is able to evaluate them very quickly. So when
Yeah,
they finally do meet in person or over Zoom, they're doing so at a much higher level of understanding of each other.
mhm. And what's a normal period of time for hire with you? What's
I
the
try to
average?
I try to compress it using those videos.
Yeah.
Um, I would say we want a decision once we present a candidate within 24 to 48 hours. And once they have the decision, we need to set an interview up in another 24 hours or so. And we try to compress it down to that was the last interview because they've already found out much about the candidate before.
And how one of the things we talked about and that really attracted me to asking you to come on as a guest is this behavioral component of influencing and motivating others. And you offered to me this great dialogue around how motivation plays a role, and it's very, very important in this recruiter process. So share with others, share with the audience why motivation is so important for recruiter excellence.
No, it's critical.
Yeah,
Uh, no candidate wants to get a call from a recruiter who's down in the dumps, not terribly interested about what he's doing,
right.
uh, taking shortcuts. They blow them off pretty fast. You need to be enthusiastic Enthusiasm sells. And the only
Mhm.
way you can be enthusiastic is if you're really passionate about what you do and you love
Mhm.
what you do. Uh, I think what I do is a fabulous job. I get to talk to people all day. And if I'm enthusiastic enough, I get more clients who are willing to work the way I work, and more candidates to enter into an interviewing process. So uh, to be motivated, everybody has different motivators, but mine is I love to keep my numbers. I keep track of every point of contact. I keep track of how many attempts I've made to call a company, how many presentations I've made to candidates or presentations to employers, how many interviews I've arranged, how many second interviews I've arranged, and so on, to keep track of my activity. So my KPIs are what motivate me.
And how do you communicate that to your candidates and your companies when you're working with them? How do you keep them motivated in doing that specifically?
Only through the encouragement that I offer. I certainly don't share my KPIs with
Right.
uh, but through encouraging them to participate in a process that's going to be fun,
Uh-huh.
that's going to be enjoyable, but that will give them exactly what it is they need.
Mhm. Mhm. I have a lot of friends who are in advertising. They do a lot of advertising sales for big media companies, and having someone like you is priceless. It truly gives the individuals on those teams the opportunity to truly align, and they feel more confident. They feel, more included in the process, and they see their value, and they're able to be very empowered in that process as well. And so I can truly appreciate, uh, the services that you offer for these companies and for these individual candidates who are seeking that opportunity to be able to live their best, right? And perform at a level that brings them a lot of joy and contentment. And
Right.
so you've done this a long time. You've been in this very specific niche of the industry for a very long time in
Not that
sales.
long. That's only 48 years.
And I say it in a way of not that we're old and not able to do the work. I say it in the way that we are tenured and very experienced, and you bring this high value to the table. And so what kind of advice, let's just talk about the candidate specifically. If somebody's out there and they're top talent and they've not yet connected with a recruiter, and they're really turmoiled. They're really in a state where they know they need to transition. They know that there's transformation there for them. What advice would you offer that candidate? Let's talk about candidates first.
Well, there's two ways to do it. One is to do a DIY, or the other is to contact a good recruiter.
Yeah.
Um, you know, the length of time I've been in the business isn't the issue. It's the knowledge that I've acquired over the period.
Exactly.
Right.
The expertise, experience, yeah.
I had hair when I started in this business. So when I say it's only 48 years, it's the first 50 that are the hardest, right?
Uh-huh.
So um, you just have to connect with a candidate and find out from them what is it that they
Yeah.
want? What are
Yeah.
their needs? What are their desires? What are their goals and aspirations?
And
And
there's
connect with
there's
them. They understand that you're caring about them and you want to work with them.
and so the market's saturated, Peter, with information, with you go and you do a search on Recruiter, or you get even more specific with your search, and you get lots and lots of choices. What's important in choosing?
In choosing a recruiter,
Mhm.
someone who has the knowledge and experience, who has
Mhm.
a track record that they can prove that they've done it well, even references. My experience stands on its own value.
Yes.
Uh, Candidates recognize it. I'm sincere about what I'm doing.
Yeah,
I'm
good,
not trying to pull something on them.
good, 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 good. And so for the same goes for companies as well,
Right.
correct? Yeah. And a lot of it comes down to many times probably is word of mouth because you've done such an excellent job. There is excellence in the services that you and your team provide, and it's made an impact.
Yeah,
So
I do
doing
get a
like
lot of referrals from word of mouth too.
yeah, definitely. So when's your next book coming out? When are you gonna write a book about all this?
I'd like to write a book about all the crazy things people do when they go to interview for jobs.
That would
Really,
be, a great book. That
yeah,
informative, informational, definitely.
some of the craziest things have happened.
I've been on both sides of that, and I can say for the candidate interviewing, I've had some rare experiences, and for the company that's hiring, I've had some rare experiences as well. And in doing what we do with talent management, we absolutely come across a lot of interesting scenarios and situations. What are a few that top of mind come out?
I was just actually thinking one on the employer side.
Uh-huh.
Uh, a well-known company, I won't mention who, in medical products.
Uh-huh.
When the regional manager holds an interview, he sits in front of a window where the sun is rising behind him, and the candidate is supposed to look at him silhouetted against the sun coming up, and he asks them a lot of tough questions
Uh-huh.
and he's trying to unnerve the candidate. And the reason for
Uh-huh.
that is he figures that doctors are going to try to do the same thing when he's trying to sell something. So if
Uh-huh.
he can handle this interview, he can handle doctors.
Love it. And the reason why I love it so much is because the workplace is behavioral and because it's behavioral, it is intense in humanity. And because it's intense in humanity, that means that we've got to better understand people and the dynamics of how it plays out each and every day so that there's a constructive and effective culture where people can go thrive and do their best and achieve and get collective results. So I
Yeah.
get that definitely.
I've seen the best and the worst in both candidates and employers
Uh-huh.
as far as the behavior goes.
Are you involved at in the work and the services that you provide? Are you on the panel or are you recording that interview, which I don't think you can do.
I'm involved in the interview at every
You
step of the way. Yeah.
yeah, good.
I
Good,
want to
good, good.
uncover anything that I was unaware of
Mhm.
on either side, and I also
Mhm.
want to see if there's an issue, how we can overcome it.
Excellent.
It's easier to do once you've seen it
Mhm.
or heard it.
And so, the scope of who you are and what you do, you this company and the work that you do and the services you provide, and yet you have found time to write a book, a an exceptional book on very specifically how to be an effective sales manager. And also, you are a leader and executive director for a nonprofit that serves a very meaningful and purposeful uh, effort to create experience with individuals in a
That
very
was a labor of
significant
love.
time. Yeah, and so the complexity and the how do you balance yourself in all you do and ensuring that you still can deliver in this company that you do? And I know you can because you've done it successfully for a long time, so that's not the question here. I want people to hear, though, that it's possible and your motivation behind how you do this so well and achieve at such high levels, and what's kind of the ingredient there for you?
Well, first of all, Make-A-Wish uh, has happened. I'm no longer involved with it. And
Okay,
the book that I wrote years and years ago, uh,
okay,
but it was very helpful when I was working with employers because I could show them the book. how to be an effective salesman. And some of them bought it. But what keeps me going? Is that what
Yeah.
the question was?
Yeah. So let's talk about that since these have happens.
Someone once said it's spizzerinctum. It's a combination of grit, tenacity, persistence, um, a desire to see the outcome positive, always being an optimist,
Mm.
being excited about everything you're working on. Um, my dad used to say when I was growing up, he'd ask me to do the lawn and I might not do a good job. And he said, you got to do the job right or you don't do it at all because every time you do a job, it's your name on it. So um, I try to go by that premise. It's everything I do has my name on it.
Mm-hmm. One takeaway for attracting top talent for companies, what would that be?
Use a good recruiter.
There you go. One takeaway for candidates who are seeking to hire into a company that they're aligned to, what would you say to them?
Let me think about that for a moment. Get a good recruiter.
Get it? I knew it was going to be that. Love it. I have completely enjoyed this today and dialoguing around this. I am out of questions. And I'll tell you this though, I could hang onto this podcast and talk to you further because I would love to dive into some other things that are relative. We're running out of time though. And so I want to ask you, is there anything else that you would love to share for employers and candidates in today's market in the realm of recruiting and maximizing excellence in that process?
For employers, save time, save money. Don't try to do it yourself. You'll waste a lot of time and it costs money to do so. Get a good recruiter who understands you, who can really sell the opportunity for you. And as far as candidates go, pretty much the same goes. Find a good recruiter who can present you properly and sell you properly because it's a sales process all the way.
Truly, it is. Well, Peter, I will say this. We look forward to continuing our relationship with you and being able to refer clients to you that are in that space of transitioning and those companies that we work with that are seeking a good recruiter as well. And so thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you and have completely enjoyed today in hearing you talk about recruitment excellence and maximizing excellence in that process for both candidates and companies. So thank you. And if you
Thank
hang
you.
on, we'll get into sharing out our company info. For all of you today that are listening and those of you that have clicked in on the live recording afterwards, please visit Peter on his LinkedIn page, connect with him. I'm sure he'll link with you. He's very open in connecting with people that are very focused and serious about this process that we are all in and maximizing excellence and effectiveness. And then definitely visit his website. It's a good content loaded website and he gives very specific information and very valuable information. So please connect with him on either LinkedIn or definitely in visiting his website. Is there any other way Peter, that people can connect directly with you?
Aside from smoke signals, they could use a telephone. Call me at 401-737-3200.
Say that one more time. 401.
737-3200.
Excellent. And we will definitely list this in the comments afterwards,
Thank you,
after
Lori.
we get done
It's a
today.
pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, definitely. All right, everybody, be blessed and have a great day. Thank you again for joining our show, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Maximize Excellence. Visit our events page on our website for details on upcoming podcasts, and visit our YouTube channel to listen to past episodes. And remember to ask yourself at the end of each day, did I do my best to maximize excellence today?